Ethan Brooks would later realize, often disguises itself as coincidence, arriving not with fanfare and orchestras, but through something as simple as seeking shelter from an unexpected storm. At 30, he was Seattle's youngest tech mogul. His company, Innovatech, valued at over $200 million. His life measured in quarterly projections and market dominance. Romance was a luxury he couldn't afford, love a distraction from the empire he was building. But on that rain-drenched Thursday evening in October, as thunder rolled across the Seattle skyline like an ancient warning, Ethan's perfectly ordered world was about to encounter its most beautiful disruption. The downpour started without warning, transforming the autumn drizzle into sheets of water that sent pedestrians scrambling for cover. Ethan had been walking to his car after another 16-hour day when the deluge began. His expensive Italian suit, no match for nature's sudden fury. The warm golden light spilling from the Horizon Art Gallery's windows called to him like a lighthouse in a storm. And for once, in his meticulously planned life, Ethan chose impulse over logic. The brass nameplate beside the heavy glass doors read, "Whispers of the Soul, an exhibition by Sophia Harper." Ethan had attended countless gallery openings for networking purposes, but he'd never truly looked at art, not with his heart open and his defenses down. Tonight would be different. The gallery hummed with sophisticated conversation, wine glasses catching the ambient lighting like liquid amber, jazz notes floating through hidden speakers. Ethan shook raindrops from his dark hair and stepped deeper into what felt like another universe, entirely a world where beauty mattered more than profit margins, where passion was currency, where souls spoke in colors instead of quarterly reports. And then he saw her. Sophia Harper stood before a massive canvas painted in oceanic blues and silver, her hands moving with ballet-like grace. As she explained her vision to a captivated audience, she wore a midnight blue dress that seemed to flow like water around her curves, her natural curls framing a face so luminous it appeared touched by starlight. But it wasn't her undeniable beauty that stopped Ethan's breath. It was the fire in her voice when she spoke about her art. The way her entire being radiated joy and creative passion. "This piece is called Eternal Yearning," she was saying, her voice melodic and warm as honey. "I painted it during a thunderstorm, much like tonight's. Storms strip away our pretenses, don't you think? They force us to feel everything we've been hiding from ourselves." Ethan found himself drawn forward by an invisible thread, his usual social calculations replaced by pure instinct. He'd worked at hundreds of events, perfected the art of strategic conversation, but tonight felt different. Tonight felt like awakening. The painting she described seemed alive, turbulent azure waves crashing against silver shores. But within the chaos, Ethan glimpsed something profound. Hope. Promise. The soul's recognition of its missing piece, calling across vast distances. "The yearning isn't painful," Sophia continued, unaware that her words were reshaping a stranger's understanding of everything. "It's hopeful. It's the heart's way of calling to its match, trusting that somewhere in this universe, that match is calling back." Their eyes met across the small crowd, and time crystallized into a single perfect moment. Sophia's words died mid-sentence as she stared at Ethan, her lips parting in surprise, her cheeks flushing rose gold. The other visitors faded into background murmur, leaving only the two of them suspended in recognition that transcended logic. Ethan had gazed into countless faces during his rise to success: competitors, board members, socialites attracted to his wealth, but he'd never seen anything like what blazed in Sophia Harper's eyes. Not attraction, though that was certainly present, but something deeper, ancient recognition, the kind poets wrote about and pragmatists dismissed as fantasy. Sophia began, then stopped, pressing one hand to her heart as if to slow its racing. "Forgive me. I seem to have lost my train of thought." The small audience chuckled politely before dispersing to examine other pieces, leaving Ethan and Sophia alone with the electric tension crackling between them. "The painting," Ethan said finally, his voice rougher than usual. "It's extraordinary, like looking into someone's soul." Sophia's smile could have powered the city. "Thank you. Are you an art collector, mister?" Ethan Brooks." He stepped closer, catching the subtle scent of jasmine in her hair, feeling his carefully constructed walls beginning to crumble. "And no, I'm not a collector. I don't understand art at all, actually. I just ducked in here to escape the storm." "Sometimes the most honest reactions come from people who aren't trying to impress anyone," Sophia said softly, her eyes never leaving his face. "What do you see when you look at it?" Ethan studied the painting again but found himself more fascinated by Sophia's expression as she waited for his response. "I see active waiting," he said slowly, the words surprising him with their truth. Not passive resignation, but hopeful anticipation, like someone standing at the edge of their known world, ready to leap into the unknown because they trust something beautiful is waiting. Sophia's eyes widened, her breath catching audibly. That's exactly what I felt while painting it." "How did you—" "Most people see only chaos or melancholy." "Maybe I recognize the feeling," Ethan admitted, his usual guardedness abandoned. He'd never shared such vulnerability with a stranger. But Sophia didn't feel like a stranger. She felt like coming home after a lifetime of wandering. They stood in comfortable silence, both pretending to study the artwork while stealing glances at each other. The gallery buzzed around them, but they existed in their own bubble of discovery. "Would you like to see the rest of the collection?" Sophia asked, her voice slightly breathless. "I could give you a private tour if you have time." Ethan thought of his dinner reservation at an exclusive restaurant, his scheduled conference calls with Tokyo investors, the stack of contracts waiting on his penthouse desk. Then he looked into Sophia's eyes and watched his priorities rearrange themselves completely. "I have all the time in the world," he said, meaning it absolutely. For the next 2 hours, Sophia guided him through her artistic journey, each painting revealing another facet of her extraordinary soul. Dancing in Shadows captured finding joy during difficult times. Mother's Song immortalized her own mother's voice. Visions of Tomorrow explored uncertainty about the future with courage instead of fear. "You don't just paint images," Ethan observed as they stood before a canvas swirling with gold and amber. "You paint emotions. You make people feel." "Art should transform you," Sophia agreed, moving close enough that their shoulders almost touched. "Otherwise, it's just expensive decoration." "And what is this one supposed to make me feel?" Ethan asked, studying the warm, inviting colors that seemed to pulse with life. Sophia turned to face him fully, her eyes reflecting the painting's golden hues. "Home, belonging, the feeling you get when you realize you're exactly where you're meant to be." Ethan met her gaze and felt his world shift permanently. "It's working." The gallery had emptied around them without either noticing. The jazz had faded to whispers, the rain against the windows gentled to a soft symphony. They were alone among Sophia's dreams, made visible, surrounded by proof that beauty could exist in a world obsessed with profit and productivity. "The gallery closes soon," Sophia said reluctantly, making no move to leave. "I don't want this evening to end," Ethan confessed, voicing what they both felt. "Neither do I." Her admission was barely audible, but earth-shaking in its honesty. Ethan reached out slowly, giving her time to retreat, and gently touched her paint-stained fingers. When she didn't pull away, he intertwined their hands, marveling at how perfectly they fit together. "I know this sounds impossible," he said, "but I feel like I've been searching my entire life for this moment, for you." Tears of joy sparkled in Sophia's eyes. "It doesn't sound impossible at all. It sounds like fate." They left the gallery together, Ethan's umbrella sheltering them both as they wandered through rain-washed streets that seemed to shimmer with new possibility. Neither wanted to break the spell with practical concerns like destinations or goodbyes. So, they talked about everything, and nothing: childhood dreams, favorite books, the way the city looked different through the lens of unexpected love. When they finally reached Sophia's apartment building, Ethan felt panic at the thought of separation. "Can I see you again?" he asked, raindrops clinging to his eyelashes like diamonds. "Tomorrow? I need to know. This isn't just a beautiful dream." Sophia's smile could have melted winter. "I'd love that, but not for dinner or drinks or anything ordinary. I want to show you something special." "What?" "Come to my studio at sunrise. I want you to watch me create. I want you to see how real magic happens." Ethan lifted her hand to his lips and pressed a tender kiss to her knuckles, a gesture so gentle it brought tears to Sophia's eyes. "Wild horses couldn't keep me away." As Ethan walked back to his car, his expensive suit damp and wrinkled, his hair disheveled from the storm, He felt transformed. The rain had stopped, leaving the city gleaming with possibility. He'd entered that gallery as a successful but hollow man and emerged as someone who believed in fate, in soulmates, in the kind of love that poets immortalized in verse. He didn't know that in 12 hours he would watch sunrise paint Sophia's face gold as she created art with hands he'd held so tenderly. He didn't know that within 6 months he would propose to her in that very gallery. He didn't know she would become his wife, his partner, his everything. All Ethan knew was that somewhere in the universe his soul had been calling out for its missing piece, and tonight, finally, miraculously, it had received an answer that would echo through eternity. Chapter 2. Building Our Forever. Love, Ethan discovered, was not the gentle current he'd expected, but an ocean vast, transformative, and capable of carrying two souls to shores they never imagined existed. 6 months after that magical October night, he stood in his penthouse kitchen at dawn, brewing coffee for the woman who had revolutionized his understanding of what it meant to be truly alive. Sophia emerged from their bedroom wearing one of his white Oxford shirts, her hair tousled from sleep, looking more radiant than any masterpiece she'd ever created. Morning light streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, catching the golden undertones in her brown skin, and Ethan felt his breath catch the same way it had that first night. "Good morning, my heart," she murmured, sliding her arms around his waist from behind and pressing soft kisses along his shoulder blade. "Good morning, beautiful." Ethan turned in her embrace, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him. "Coffee's almost ready." "You spoil me," Sophia said, tilting her face up for a proper kiss. Ethan obliged, losing himself in the sweetness of her lips and the jasmine scent that had become his favorite perfume. These dawn moments had become sacred to him. Before Sophia, mornings were ruthless efficiency protein bars consumed while scanning market reports, his mind already calculating the day's strategic moves. Now he woke early just to watch her sleep, to bring her coffee in bed, to steal these precious minutes before the world demanded their attention. "I have something to show you," Sophia said, her eyes sparkling with barely contained excitement. She led him to the living room, where an easel stood draped in white silk. His penthouse had undergone a metamorphosis since Sophia's arrival. The sterile minimalism had been replaced by warmth and lifer paintings adorning every wall, art supplies claiming corners, fresh flowers in crystal vases. Somehow the cold showcase had become a home. "You've been mysteriously secretive about this project," Ethan said, his hands settling on her hips as she positioned herself beside the easel. "Close your eyes," Sophia commanded with playful authority. Ethan obeyed, hearing the whisper of silk being pulled away, feeling anticipation build in his chest. "Open them." Ethan's eyes fluttered open, and his world tilted. The canvas showed their love story painted in breathtaking detail that first night in the gallery, captured in vivid, luminous strokes. There they were, him in his expensive suit, looking lost and amazed, her in midnight blue, both caught in that moment when souls recognized their match. But Sophia had painted something Ethan hadn't seen, that night-golden threads connecting their hearts, visible only to an artist's loving perception. Surrounding the central image were smaller vignettes, their first sunrise in her studio, when she'd shown him how she mixed colors like poetry, their weekend at his mountain cabin, when they'd talked until dawn about building a life together, quiet dinners where conversation flowed like wine, stolen kisses in the rain. "Sophia," he breathed, his voice thick with emotion, "this is extraordinary. You've captured not just what happened, but what it felt like." "I painted what I see when I look at us," she said softly, moving to stand beside him. "When I paint our story, I see our wedding, our children, growing old together. I see love that doesn't fade, but deepens like vintage wine." Ethan turned to face her completely, his hands framing her face with infinite tenderness. "Marry me." The words escaped before rational thought could intervene, but Ethan felt no urge to retrieve them. This was right. This was what his soul had been moving toward since that rainy October night. Sophia's eyes widened, her breath catching. "Ethan, I know it might seem sudden," he said quickly, his thumbs stroking across her cheekbones. "I know we've only been together 6 months, but Sophia, I lived 30 years without understanding what home felt like. Then I found you. You're not just my love. You're my home, my future, my everything. But we haven't discussed practical things, the future we both want." Then, let's discuss it now. Ethan led her to the couch, taking her hands in his larger ones. Tell me your dreams, sweetheart. Paint me a picture of what forever looks like to you. Sophia took a shaky breath, her fingers intertwining with his. I want a true partnership, someone who supports my art but doesn't try to manage it. I want a husband who comes home to me, not just to a house. I want children who grow up seeing love as action, not just words. I want to travel and create and build something beautiful with someone who chooses me every single day, not just when it's convenient. I want all of that, Ethan said fervently. With you, only with you, Sophia. Before you, I thought success was measured in stock prices and market share. Now I know it's measured in moments like this coffee shared in comfortable silence, your laughter when I attempt to cook, the way you look at me like I'm worthy of the extraordinary love you offer so freely. Tears spilled down Sophia's cheeks, but her smile could have powered the entire city. Are you really proposing while we're both in pajamas with morning breath and bedhead? Ethan laughed, the sound rich with joy and possibility. Would you prefer I wait for a more traditionally romantic moment? Because I have to tell you, every moment with you feels like poetry to me. No, Sophia said quickly, launching herself into his arms. Don't wait. This is perfect. This is us real and unguarded and completely in love. Is that a yes? Ethan asked, his heart hammering against his ribs. That's a yes, Sophia whispered against his lips. Yes, yes, 1,000 times, yes. They kissed with all the passion and promise of two souls recognizing their destiny. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. I don't have a ring yet, he admitted sheepishly. I don't need a ring to know this is real, Sophia assured him. But when you do choose one. Yes, something with history. Something that tells a story. Something that means more than its price tag. 3 weeks later, Ethan blindfolded Sophia and led her through the familiar doors of the Horizon Art Gallery. She'd been curious about their mysterious destination all afternoon, pressing him for hints he'd refused to give. Ethan Brooks, if you don't tell me where you're taking me, I'm going to paint you as a gargoyle in my next series, she threatened playfully. A devastatingly handsome gargoyle, I hope, he replied, guiding her carefully around the exact spot where they'd first spoken. The gallery had been transformed for this private evening, illuminated by hundreds of candles that cast dancing shadows on the walls. Ethan had commissioned the space for the night, creating an intimate shrine to their love story. You can look now. Sophia removed the silk blindfold and gasped. The gallery had been arranged to showcase their journey, her paintings from that first exhibition. Photographs Ethan had secretly taken of her working in her studio, and in the center, a commissioned piece she'd never seen. Ethan, what is this? Our beginning, he said simply, leading her toward the central painting. I commissioned this from Lucas Bennett. I described our love to him, and he painted this interpretation. The painting showed two figures dancing in falling rain, their faces lifted toward each other in perfect harmony. Golden light surrounded them, and if you looked closely, you could see they weren't just dancing, they were floating, lifted by the sheer power of their connection. It's called Finding Home, Ethan continued, dropping to one knee beside the artwork. Because that's what you are to me. Sophia, not just my love, but my home, my peace, my adventure, my forever. He produced a vintage ring box, opening it to reveal a stunning Art Deco engagement ring. The centerpiece was a rare cognac diamond, surrounded by smaller white diamonds in an intricate sunburst pattern that caught the candlelight, capturing fire. This ring belonged to my grandmother, Clara, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion. She told me before she died to save it for a woman who could see beauty in ordinary moments, who could love with her whole heart, who could make art out of everyday life. She said I'd recognize her instantly when we met. Sophia knelt beside him, tears streaming freely down her face. Ethan, Sophia Harper, will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving I'm worthy of the love you give so generously? Will you paint our forever together? Yes, she sobbed, extending her trembling hand. Yes, my love. Always and forever. Yes. As Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger, it caught the candlelight and cast rainbow patterns across the gallery walls, transforming the entire space into a kaleidoscope of promise and possibility. Their wedding 3 months later was an intimate garden ceremony at the Washington Park Arboretum, surrounded by blooming cherry trees and their closest family and friends. Sophia walked down the petal-strewn aisle to Pachelbel's Cannon, wearing her grandmother's ivory silk gown, altered to perfection, carrying jasmine and white roses that perfumed the spring air. Ethan, devastatingly handsome in charcoal gray, wept openly when he saw her approaching, flanked by both sets of parents. "You look like every dream I never dared to have," he whispered when she reached his side. "You look like home," she whispered back. Their vows were deeply personal and heartfelt. Ethan promised to cherish her art, to come home to her every night, to choose love over ambition in every decision he faced. Sophia promised to believe in their dreams together, to find magic in ordinary moments, to love him through every season of their lives. "By the power vested in me by the state of Washington," the officiant declared, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Ethan, you may kiss your bride." As their lips met in their first kiss as a married couple, cherry blossom petals rained down like confetti, and Ethan felt the final piece of his heart slide into place. This was what he'd been unconsciously searching for, this perfect woman who challenged him to be better, who saw beauty in everything, who loved him not for his wealth but for the man he became when all pretense fell away. That night, in their honeymoon suite overlooking Elliott Bay, they made love with the tenderness of souls perfectly matched and the passion of hearts that would never tire of discovering each other. "I love you, Mrs. Brooks," Ethan murmured against her hair as they lay entwined afterward. "I love you too, Mr. Brooks," Sophia replied, tracing lazy patterns on his chest. "Forever and always." Outside their window, Seattle sparkled like fallen stars, and in their bed, two hearts beat in perfect synchronization, already dreaming of the beautiful life they would build together. Neither could foresee that sometimes the greatest tests of love come not from external forces, but from the very ambitions that initially brought two people together. For now, there was only love, pure and perfect and absolutely certain that nothing could ever diminish its power. Chapter 3. When Dreams Become Nightmares. The cruelest heartbreaks, Sophia discovered, arrive not with dramatic betrayals or sudden departures, but through the slow erosion of attention. Like watching someone you love disappear one missed dinner, one forgotten conversation, one broken promise at a time. 2 years into their marriage, as Seattle's autumn painted the world in shades of gold and loss, she sat alone at their dining table, watching Ethan's untouched salmon grow cold while he paced their living room, more animated about a conference call than he'd been about anything concerning her in months. "No, Lucas, you're missing the bigger picture," Ethan said into his wireless headset, his free hand gesturing emphatically to no one. "Innovatech expanding internationally isn't just growth. It's positioning ourselves as the global leader before our competitors even realize what's happening." Sophia moved her fork through her own half-eaten meal, remembering when Ethan used to describe her paintings with that same passionate intensity. When had his eyes stopped lighting up at her artistic victories? When had "how was your day" become a question he forgot to ask? She'd painted him recently, a piece she'd never shown him called Fading Light. In it, Ethan's figure grew progressively more transparent across the canvas, dissolving into a background of spreadsheets and stock charts, until only his outline remained, a ghost haunting their life together. "Sweetheart," she tried softly when he paused for breath, "your dinner is getting cold." Ethan held up one finger without looking at her, a gesture that once came with apologetic smiles, but now felt dismissive, careless. "Right, but here's what you're not understanding about the Tokyo market, Lucas. They prioritize innovation over legacy relationships, which gives us a massive competitive advantage." Sophia stood quietly, cleared both plates, and scraped the carefully prepared meal into the garbage disposal. She'd spent 2 hours creating Ethan's favorite dish, hoping to recreate those early evenings when their dining room was a sanctuary, where they'd talk until midnight about dreams that seemed possible when shared. Now their beautiful penthouse felt like an expensive hotel where Ethan occasionally slept between business trips to cities she couldn't pronounce. The irony cut deep. Ethan's meteoric success had been built partially on the emotional foundation of their marriage. He'd credited meeting her with giving him the stability and inspiration to take Innovatech from promising startup to major player. "She makes me believe in magic," he'd told investors at a company gala, his arm around her waist, his smile genuine. When someone loves you the way Sophia loves me, you want to build something worthy of that devotion. But somewhere in the pursuit of building something worthy, he'd forgotten what had inspired the building in the first place. I understand it's late in Hong Kong, Ethan continued, settling onto their couch with his laptop, completely oblivious to her cleaning up around him. But patch me through to Wei anyway. This can't wait until they're tomorrow. Sophia paused in the kitchen doorway, studying her husband with the objective eye she usually reserved for her art. He remained devastatingly handsome, perhaps more so now, with success adding confidence to his natural magnetism. His dark hair was perfectly styled despite the 16-hour day, his expensive shirt crisp, his posture radiating the authority that made grown men defer to his judgment. But his wedding ring, she noticed with a pang, spent more time on bathroom counters and nightstands than on his finger, forgotten in the rush of more pressing concerns. "Ethan," she said more firmly, moving to stand where he couldn't ignore her, "can we please talk?" "Just 5 more minutes, baby," he replied without lifting his eyes from the screen. This Hong Kong situation is time-sensitive. 5 minutes became an hour, then 2. Sophia retreated to her studio, the one room in their penthouse that remained completely hers, where Ethan never ventured anymore because it overflowed with emotions he no longer had bandwidth to process. She stood before her easel, studying the painting she'd been working on for weeks. The Weight of Solitude showed a woman in flowing robes at a window, her hand pressed against glass, watching for someone who might never return. The woman's face remained obscured, but her posture conveyed everything: hope battling resignation, love wrestling with loneliness, the quiet desperation of someone slowly disappearing from their own life. Sophia picked up her brush and added another layer of shadow to the woman's figure, darkening her until she became almost a silhouette against the bright window. The painting was becoming a self-portrait she'd never intended to create. Her phone buzzed with a text from Olivia. "Coffee tomorrow? You've been too quiet lately." Sophia stared at the message, realizing she couldn't remember the last conversation she'd had that wasn't about Ethan's schedule, his travel plans, or her expected presence at another corporate function, where she smiled beautifully while feeling herself grow smaller. She typed back, "Can't tomorrow. Ethan has the Singapore investors' dinner." But even as she sent it, Sophia couldn't recall Ethan actually inviting her. She simply assumed her attendance was expected, the way successful wives were supposed to accessorize their husbands' achievements. Olivia's response was immediate. "When did you last do something just for you?" Sophia stared at the question until her eyes blurred, then deleted the entire conversation. When she finally emerged from her studio near midnight, Ethan sat exactly where she'd left him, surrounded by papers and glowing screens, his phone still pressed to his ear. He'd loosened his tie and rolled up his sleeves, radiating an energy that reminded her painfully of their early days. Except now that passion was directed towards something that explicitly excluded her. "The Tokyo presentation has to be flawless," he was saying. "I'm talking about 15 slides that will determine whether Innovatic becomes a global powerhouse or remains a regional player." Sophia sat on the couch's edge, close enough to touch him, but feeling oceans away. Ethan's free hand rested near her thigh, and she covered it with her own, hoping for acknowledgement, connection, anything. He pulled his hand away absently, needing it to type notes on his laptop. "I'm going to bed," she whispered. Ethan nodded without looking at her. "I'll be up soon." But he wouldn't be. Sophia knew he'd work until dawn, shower, and leave before she woke, leaving only a hastily scrawled note. "Early meetings. See you tonight." And the fading scent of his cologne on his pillow. In their master bedroom, Sophia stood before the vanity mirror, studying her reflection. At 28, she remained beautiful. Her skin still glowed. Her eyes still sparkled when she found something worth sparkling about. But there was something new in her expression, a sadness that makeup couldn't conceal, a loneliness that seemed to deepen with each passing day. She remembered their first anniversary weekend at the mountain cabin, where Ethan had first said he loved her. They'd made love on the deck under infinite stars, and afterward, wrapped in each other's arms, Ethan had whispered, "Promise me we'll never let the world make us forget this. Promise we'll always choose each other first." "I promise," she'd whispered back, meaning it with every cell in her body. Now, sliding into their king-sized bed alone, Sophia wondered when promises had become so fragile, when the man who'd once called her his North Star had begun navigating by different constellations entirely. She fell asleep clutching his pillow, breathing in the fading traces of the cologne she'd given him for Christmas, and dreamed of the Ethan who used to wake early just to watch her sleep, who'd told her that her face was the first thing he wanted to see every morning and the last thing he wanted to see every night. In the living room, Ethan finally ended his marathon conference call at 3:17 a.m., his eyes burning from 18 straight hours of screen time. He started toward their bedroom, then hesitated outside the door, hearing Sophia's peaceful breathing within. He almost went inside, almost crawled into bed beside his wife, and held her the way he used to. Almost whispered apologies for missing dinner, for the growing distance, for letting his ambition consume everything beautiful in his life. Instead, he went to the guest room, telling himself it was consideration he didn't want to wake her. Tomorrow would be better. Next week would be different. But tomorrow brought new crises, and next week brought new opportunities. And with each rationalization, the distance between them grew wider until they were living parallel lives in the same beautiful space two people who had forgotten how to choose each other first. Love. Ethan was learning too late, couldn't be placed on hold while pursuing other dreams. It required daily tending, constant nurturing, the kind of presence he was no longer capable of giving. And in her studio, Sophia continued painting women who waited, women who disappeared, women who loved so completely they forgot to save anything for themselves, never realizing she was documenting the slow death of her own heart. Chapter 4. The night everything shattered. Hearts, Sophia learned, don't break with the dramatic crack of thunder that poets describe. They shatter quietly, like crystal meeting stone in the dark. The sound so soft you almost miss it until you step on the pieces later and realize the damage was always irreversible. For her, that silent destruction began on a Friday evening in March, when she stood alone in the Horizon Art Gallery, surrounded by 2 years of her soul's work, watching the clock tick past 9:30, and finally accepting that her husband valued everything else more than the woman who'd once been his entire world. Reflections of Love. A journey through marriage was supposed to be their celebration. To their testimony to love's endurance, 24 paintings chronicling their relationship, from that magical first encounter to their wedding day, to the quiet domestic moments that had once felt like glimpses of heaven. Sophia had spent 8 months creating this collection, pouring her heart onto canvas in a desperate attempt to remind Ethan and herself of what they used to mean to each other. The gallery buzzed with Seattle's cultural elite critics whose reviews could launch careers, collectors who'd flown in from New York and Los Angeles specifically for this exhibition, curators from major museums. Olivia had helped her dress for the evening, choosing a flowing emerald dress that made Sophia's skin luminous and her eyes sparkle with flecks of gold. "You look absolutely radiant," Olivia had said, fastening Ethan's anniversary gift, a delicate diamond necklace, around Sophia's throat. "When Ethan sees you tonight, he's going to remember why he fell in love with you all over again." "He promised he'd be here by 8, Sophia had replied, smoothing the silk fabric with nervous hands. The investor presentation should end by 7:30. But 8 o'clock had passed without a text. Then 8:15, 8:30, 8:45. Now it was approaching 10, and Sophia's cheeks ached from maintaining her professional smile, while friends and strangers repeatedly asked, "Where's that brilliant husband of yours?" And Ethan must be incredibly proud of this beautiful work. "He's running late from a business meeting," she'd answered countless times, the excuse growing thinner with each repetition. You know how these things can run over. But inside, something vital was dying. Each glance toward the gallery entrance, each surge of hope when the door opened, each crash of disappointment when another stranger's face appeared, instead of Ethan's every moment carved away another piece of her heart, until she felt hollow, echoing with the sound of her own breathing. The exhibition's centerpiece was a painting she titled "Promise Kept," a luminous recreation of their wedding dance, painted from memory in shades of ivory and gold. Ethan's face in the painting glowed with such devotion that several viewers had commented on the obvious love between the subjects. "The adoration in your husband's eyes practically leaps off the canvas," the art critic from Seattle magazine had gushed. "You can feel his love in every brushstroke. He must have been wonderfully patient as a model." Sophia had simply smiled and nodded, not mentioning that Ethan hadn't seen this painting or any others in the collection. He'd been too consumed with mergers and acquisitions to visit her studio in months. At 9:45, her phone finally buzzed. Crisis with Singapore deal. Trying to wrap up. We'll be there soon. Sorry, babe. Sophia stared at the message until the words blurred no acknowledgement of what tonight meant, no understanding that this wasn't just another gallery opening, but the culmination of months of work, her most personal artistic statement, a love letter painted in oils and desperate hope. The formal presentation had ended at 9. The critics had left by 9:15. The collectors had made their purchasing decisions and departed by 9:30. Ethan hadn't just missed her exhibition, he'd missed everything that mattered. She was saying goodbye to the last few guests when she heard his familiar voice near the entrance. Sophia, there you are. Gorgeous. Ethan swept into the gallery like he owned the space, still in his expensive business suit, phone in one hand, briefcase in the other. He was beautiful and successful and confident, radiating the kind of power that made boardrooms fall silent when he entered. Sophia felt absolutely nothing when she looked at him. Ethan, she said quietly, her voice steady, despite the storm destroying her chest. You made it. Of course I made it, he said, leaning down to kiss her cheek without really seeing her. Sorry, I'm a little behind schedule, baby. These Singapore investors are in completely different time zones, and the timing was crucial for. It's 10:15, Sophia interrupted softly. Ethan checked his platinum watch and grimaced. Really? Time just got away from me. But I'm here now, right? He gestured vaguely at the nearly empty gallery, still holding his buzzing phone. Show me around. Tell me about all this. All this? Sophia repeated, something dangerous creeping into her voice. Your paintings, Ethan clarified, finally noticing her tone. They look amazing. Really professional setup. Sophia looked at her husband, really looked at him, and saw a stranger wearing Ethan's face, this man who had reduced 8 months of her soul's work to all this, who couldn't silence his phone for 5 minutes to focus on the most important professional moment of her life. Who seemed genuinely puzzled that timing mattered when you claim to love someone. The exhibition is over, she said simply. What do you mean it's over? There are still people here. The formal presentation ended 45 minutes ago. The critics left an hour ago. The collectors have made their decisions and gone home. Sophia's voice remained eerily calm. You missed it, Ethan. You missed all of it. For the first time that evening, Ethan seemed to hear something that made him actually look at her. Really look at her. Soph, sweetheart, I said I was sorry. This Singapore deal is worth 60 million to Innovatech. 60 million. You understand how important? No, Sophia said, and the word hung in the air like a death sentence. I don't understand. I don't understand how the man who once told me that my happiness was worth more than all the money in the world can stand here and explain to me why $60 million is more important than keeping a promise to his wife. Ethan's phone buzzed with an incoming call. Without thinking, he glanced at the screen. That glance, lasting no more than 2 seconds, was the moment their marriage truly died. I see, Sophia whispered, and Ethan heard something in her voice that made his blood freeze. Soph, it's not like that. Isn't it? She asked, her voice maintaining that terrible quiet control. When was the last time you asked about my work, Ethan? When was the last time you came to my studio just because you wanted to see what I was creating? When was the last time we had a conversation that wasn't interrupted by your phone? Ethan opened his mouth to answer and realized with growing horror that he couldn't. Days, weeks, the timeline blurred into a haze of conference calls and quarterly projections and priorities that had somehow stopped, including the woman he'd once claimed to love more than life itself. I've been working, he started weakly. We've both been working, Sophia replied. The difference is, I've been working to build something beautiful for us, while you've been working to build something that doesn't include me at all. They stood facing each other in the center of the gallery, surrounded by paintings that depicted a love story they were no longer living. The few remaining guests began to notice the tension, conversations quieting as people sensed drama unfolding. Can we not do this here? Ethan asked, his voice tight with embarrassment. Where else? Sophia asked. At home, where you're never available to talk. In our bedroom, where you sleep 4 hours before leaving for another 18-hour day. When exactly would be convenient for you to discuss our marriage, Ethan? Ethan's phone rang. The name Singapore Investors flashed on the screen. Without thinking, he answered it. Ethan Brooks. What? No, that's not what we agreed. He covered the phone and looked at Sophia. I have to take this. It's Singapore. Sophia stared at him for a long moment, and Ethan watched the last flicker of hope, of love, of willingness to fight for what they'd shared simply extinguish in her eyes. She turned and walked away without a word. Ethan stood there holding his phone. Singapore on the line, his wife disappearing through the crowd. And for the first time in months, he understood the magnitude of what he was losing. But the voice on the phone was urgent. The deal was collapsing, and $60 million hung in the balance. He chose the money again. By the time Ethan finished the call and found Sophia again, she was saying goodbye to the last few guests, her professional mask firmly in place. She'd rebuilt her walls completely. But Ethan could see the fortress she'd constructed around her heart. Ready to go home? He asked carefully. Home? Sophia repeated, testing the word like it belonged to a foreign language. Yes, I suppose we should go home. The car ride passed in silence, except for the soft hum of the engine and Ethan's phone buzzing with follow-up texts he didn't dare check. Sophia stared out at the city lights, and Ethan found himself trying to remember the last time they'd really talked, really connected, really been present with each other, instead of just existing in the same space. At their penthouse, Sophia went straight to their bedroom and began removing her jewelry with mechanical precision. Ethan stood in the doorway, watching her, searching for words that might bridge the chasm that had opened between them. The paintings were beautiful, he offered. What I saw of them, you're incredibly talented, Soph. You always have been. Sophia met his eyes in the vanity mirror. Thank you. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe you could show me the rest. I could take the afternoon off and you could walk me through each piece. Tell me the stories behind them. Tomorrow you have the board meeting about the Tokyo expansion, Sophia said without emotion. Sunday you're flying to Los Angeles for the tech conference. Monday you start the week-long negotiations with the Berlin investors. A chill ran down Ethan's spine. How do you know my schedule better than I do? Because your assistant emails me your calendar every week. So I know when not to expect you home. Sophia's voice was matter-of-fact, but Ethan heard the exhaustion underneath. I've become very efficient at planning my life around your absence. The words hit Ethan like physical blows. That's not fair, isn't it? Sophia turned to face him fully. Tell me, Ethan, when was the last time you woke up next to me? When was the last time we made love? When was the last time you asked how my day was and actually listened to the answer? Ethan searched his memory and came up empty weeks, months. Had it really been that long? Everything I'm doing is for us, he said desperately. For our future together. No, Sophia said softly. You're building your future. I'm just expected to wait quietly in the wings until you're ready to include me in it. That's not true. When was the last time we talked about having children, Ethan? Sophia's question stopped him cold. Remember? You wanted 3. I wanted 4. We had names picked out, nursery themes planned, a timeline for when we'd start trying. Ethan felt the floor shift beneath his feet. We're still young. There's time. Time for what? For you to ignore them the way you ignore me. For you to miss their first words because you're on a call with Tokyo. Their first steps because you're in Singapore. The argument escalated from their years of resentment and loneliness pouring out of Sophia, while Ethan defended himself with profit margins and market opportunities, and promises of future availability that sounded hollow even to his own ears. Maybe if you understood business, Ethan heard himself say, the words escaping before his exhausted mind could stop them, you'd appreciate what I'm trying to accomplish. The silence that followed was deafening. And maybe, Sophia replied, her voice deadly quiet, if you remembered how to love instead of just acquire, you'd understand what you're destroying. They stared at each other across their bedroom, and Ethan saw his wife clearly for the first time in months. She was thinner, her eyes shadowed with exhaustion and disappointment. When had the vibrant woman he'd fallen in love with begun to fade away? I can't do this anymore, Sophia whispered, and Ethan felt his world begin to collapse. I can't keep disappearing from my own life, waiting for you to remember I exist." The next morning, they sat across from each other at their dining table like strangers negotiating a business deal. Neither had slept. Ethan had spent the night on the couch, staring at the ceiling, trying to understand how he'd lost control of everything that mattered. Sophia had packed a suitcase. "I think," she said carefully, not meeting his eyes, "we should consider separation." The word hit Ethan like a sledgehammer to the chest. "Sophia, no. We can fix this. I can change." "Can you?" she asked, and her voice held no anger anymore, just infinite sadness. "Can you really, or will you make the same promises you've made about coming home early, taking real vacations, putting your phone away during dinner? How many broken promises can one marriage survive?" Ethan wanted to argue, to fight, to promise her anything if she'd just give him another chance. But looking at his wife, really looking at her, he saw the truth he'd been avoiding for months. She'd already lost her. The divorce papers were signed 3 weeks later in a lawyer's office that smelled like leather and lost dreams. They divided their assets with clinical precision. She kept the art and her independence. He kept the money and his empty success. Their wedding rings sat on the mahogany desk like evidence of a crime neither wanted to claim. And when Ethan walked out of that office, he felt like he was leaving behind, not just his marriage, but his soul. Chapter 5. Secrets and Silent Tears. Life's most profound gifts, Sophia discovered, often arrive wrapped in the paper of our deepest pain, disguised so completely that we almost miss the miracle hidden beneath our tears. She learned this truth on a gray April morning 3 weeks after signing papers that legally dissolved the greatest love story of her life, sitting in Dr. Emily Lynn's sterile examination room, while Seattle's endless drizzle painted abstract sorrow on the clinic windows. "Congratulations, Mrs." "I'm sorry, Ms. Harper, Doctor," Lynn said with a warm smile, quickly correcting herself as she glanced at Sophia's updated patient file. "You're approximately 6 weeks pregnant." The words floated in the air like soap bubbles, beautiful, impossible, destined to burst. Sophia stared at the doctor's kind face, certain she'd misheard, certain the universe couldn't be cruel enough to offer this gift now, when she had no one to share it with. "I'm sorry, what?" she whispered, her hand instinctively moving to her still flat abdomen. "Pregnant." "Doctor," Lynn repeated gently, turning her computer monitor so Sophia could see the ultrasound image. "See this tiny flutter here? That's your baby's heartbeat. Strong and steady. Based on your last menstrual period, I'd estimate you're due in early December." Sophia's mind raced backward, calculating dates with the desperate precision of a woman whose world had just turned upside down. 6 weeks meant conception in early March, those final desperate weeks of her marriage when she'd tried so hard to reconnect with Ethan, when they'd made love with the quiet desperation of two people trying to save something already broken. Her baby had been created during their last attempt at forever. "Is everything all right?" "Doctor," Lynn asked, professional concern evident as she watched Sophia's face cycle through shock, wonder, terror, and back to shock. "My husband and we're divorced," Sophia managed, the words still feeling like swallowing glass. "The divorce was finalized last week." "Doctor." Lynn's expression softened with understanding. "I see. This is certainly unexpected timing. Do you have questions about your options?" "Options?" Sophia knew what the doctor was delicately offering, understood that at 6 weeks, choices still existed, but as she stared at the tiny flicker on the ultrasound screen, no bigger than a sesame seed but somehow containing all the hope and love she thought she'd lost, only one option felt possible. "I'm keeping the baby," she said, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I'm absolutely keeping my baby." "Wonderful, Doctor." Lynn smiled genuinely. "In that case, let's discuss prenatal care, nutrition, and what to expect in the coming weeks." The next hour passed in a blur of pamphlets and prescription bottles, appointment cards, and dietary guidelines. Sophia nodded and smiled and asked appropriate questions, but inside, her heart raced with questions. Lynn couldn't answer. Should she tell Ethan about their child? How does a woman raise a baby alone? How do you explain to a child that their father chose success over love? Outside the clinic, Sophia sat in her modest Honda for nearly an hour, Staring at the ultrasound photo Dr. Lin had printed, the baby looked like a tiny seahorse floating in an ocean of possibility. And despite everything, the divorce, the loneliness, the terrifying uncertainty, Sophia felt love bloom in her chest like flowers after winter rain. "Hello, little one," she whispered to the black and white image. "I don't know how we're going to do this, but I promise you'll be so loved. You'll be the most cherished baby in the world." She drove to her new apartment, a modest 2-bedroom above an art studio in Capitol Hill, and sat at her small kitchen table, phone in hand, scrolling to Ethan's contact information. Her thumb hovered over his name for 23 minutes, mind spinning with possible conversations. What would she say? "Hello, Ethan. I know you chose your company over our marriage. But surprise, you're going to be a father." Would he think she was trying to manipulate him, force him back into a relationship he'd clearly outgrown? Would he demand custody rights while remaining emotionally unavailable? Would he suggest termination for the sake of convenience? Sophia's hands moved protectively to her stomach. No. This baby was hers, created from love, even if that love had died before the pregnancy was discovered. She would protect this child from disappointment, from feeling like an obligation rather than a blessing, from the pain of having a father who saw them as an inconvenience to his precious schedule. The decision felt like stepping off a cliff while simultaneously growing wings. That evening, Olivia arrived with Thai takeout and a bottle of wine she didn't open after seeing the pregnancy book scattered across Sophia's coffee table. "Soph," Olivia breathed, sinking onto the second-hand couch. "How are you feeling? Are you okay? What do you need? Should I murder Ethan?" Despite everything, Sophia laughed. Her first genuine laughter in weeks. "I'm scared. I'm excited. I'm overwhelmed. I feel like I'm about to perform surgery without medical training." "Have you told him?" "No." Sophia hugged a throw pillow against her chest, like armor. "And I'm not going to—" Olivia's eyebrows shot up. "Soph, whatever Ethan became, he's still going to be this baby's biological father. Doesn't he have a right to know? Does he?" Sophia asked, her voice quiet but strong. "A man who couldn't make time for his wife, who missed the most important night of my career for a business deal, who chose profit margins over the woman he claimed to love. What kind of father would he be? Maybe becoming a father would change him. Or maybe this baby would become another obligation he resents, another demand on his time that interferes with his precious empire." Sophia shook her head firmly. "I won't do that to my child. I won't let them grow up feeling like they're competing with conference calls for their father's attention." Olivia was quiet for a long moment, then reached over and squeezed Sophia's hand. "If this is what you want, I'll support you completely. But honey, raising a baby alone is going to be harder than you can imagine." "I know," Sophia whispered. "But I also know that being ignored by someone who's supposed to love you is harder. I lived that reality for the last year of my marriage. I won't subject my child to it." The following weeks blurred together in a haze of morning sickness, job searching, and carefully controlled emotions. Sophia had modest savings from her art sales, but not enough to support a child long term. She took a part-time position teaching art classes at a community center, picked up freelance graphic design projects, and began painting with desperate intensity. Her new work was differential, powerful, suffused with an emotion she couldn't name. She painted mothers and children, protection and fierce love, the strength that emerges when you have something worth defending. Gallery owners who had previously dismissed her as too sentimental suddenly took serious notice. "There's something transformed about your work," Lucas Bennett observed during a studio visit. "It's like you've discovered a new source of power." "I have," Sophia replied, her hand unconsciously resting on her growing belly. "I'm creating for 2 now." At 12 weeks, when morning sickness gave way to renewed energy, Sophia finally told her parents. Her mother cried from joy and concern in equal measure, while her father asked quietly about Ethan. "He doesn't know," Sophia admitted during Sunday dinner. "And I don't plan to tell him." "Sweetheart," her mother said gently, "that's a decision you might regret later." "The only thing I regret," Sophia replied firmly, "is taking so long to realize that love shouldn't feel like begging for scraps of attention." By her second trimester, Sophia had found her rhythm in this new life. She painted nursery murals for other expecting mothers, created commission pieces for pediatric offices, and began a series called Letters to My Unborn Chilled Abstract, pieces that captured her hopes, fears, and boundless love. Her belly grew round and proud, and she talked to the baby constantly while painting, while preparing simple meals, while walking through Pike Place Market, selecting fresh produce. "You're going to love Saturday mornings at the market," she told her expanding middle. "We'll buy flowers and sourdough bread, and I'll teach you to find beauty in ordinary moments." At her 20-week ultrasound, Dr. Lynn smiled as she moved the wand across Sophia's gel-covered stomach. "Would you like to know the gender?" "Yes," Sophia breathed, watching the grainy image that now clearly showed a tiny human form complete with fingers and toes and a perfect profile. "Congratulations, you're having a boy." Sophia burst into tear-shappy tears she couldn't explain or control. She was carrying a son who would grow up knowing he was wanted, loved, treasured for exactly who he was rather than what he might accomplish. "Do you have a name chosen, Doctor?" Lynn asked, printing new photos that Sophia would treasure forever. "Liam," Sophia said without hesitation. "Liam David. It means God is salvation." Because that's what this baby represented, her salvation from despair so deep she thought she might drown in it, her second chance at a love that would never disappoint her. The remaining months were a masterclass in independence and inner strength. Sophia learned to assemble cribs using YouTube tutorials, attended childbirth classes where she was often the only woman without a partner, and painted a nursery in soft blues and greens that felt like a peaceful forest glade. She bought tiny clothes and blankets, read parenting books until her eyes burned, and created birth plans that accounted for doing this completely alone. Olivia would be her labor coach, her parents on standby, and she'd built a support network of other single mothers who understood the unique challenges and unexpected joys of solo parenting. At 36 weeks, enormously pregnant but glowing with health and purpose, Sophia sat in the rocking chair her parents had given her, writing in the journal she'd started for Liam. "My dearest son," she wrote in careful script, "by the time you read this, you'll probably wonder why I never told your father about you. The truth is, I wanted to protect you from conditional love, the kind that makes you feel like you're not enough, just as you are. Your father is a good man who lost his way, but I couldn't risk him losing sight of you, too." Outside her window, autumn painted Seattle in familiar shades of gold and crimson, the same colors that had surrounded her during those final weeks of her marriage. But inside her apartment, everything was warm and ready and full of anticipation for the miracle approaching. Sophia placed both hands on her belly, feeling Liam's strong kicks against her palms, his restless energy that suggested he was as eager to meet her as she was to hold him. "We're going to be more than okay, little one," she whispered to her unborn son. "We're going to be magnificent." She had no way of knowing that 3 years later, a frightening fever and a desperate phone call would bring Liam's father racing back into their carefully constructed world. She had no way of knowing that love, real love, sometimes needed to be completely broken before it could heal, stronger than ever. All Sophia knew was that beneath her heart, she carried hope given form, love made flesh, and the chance to build a family founded on presence rather than promises, attention rather than ambition. Outside, the first winter storm of the season began to gather, but inside her small apartment, Sophia and Liam were warm and safe and already irrevocably home. Chapter 6. A mother's heart, a fighter's soul. The moment a woman becomes a mother, she discovers strength she never knew existed, not just physical, but fierce depths of courage that emerge only when love demands the impossible. For Sophia, this revelation came at 4:23 a.m. on the 8th of December, when Liam David entered the world weighing 6 pounds 2 ounces and immediately changed everything she thought she knew about the capacity for love. "He's absolutely perfect, Doctor," Lynn announced, placing the crying bundle on Sophia's chest. 10 fingers, 10 toes, and lungs that clearly work beautifully. Sophia looked down at her son and felt her heart expand beyond any dimension she'd known possible. Liam had Ethan's thick, dark hair and impossibly long eyelashes, but when his eyes briefly opened, they were entirely his own. In that first moment, Sophia felt the axis of her universe shift permanently. "Hello, my beautiful boy," she whispered, her voice breaking with exhaustion and wonder. "I'm your mama. I've been waiting forever to meet you." Liam's tiny fist wrapped around her finger with surprising strength, and Sophia knew with crystal certainty that she would face any challenge, to overcome any obstacle to protect this small person who had just made her life infinitely more meaningful. Olivia, who had been her birth coach through 16 hours of labor, wiped tears from her eyes. "He's gorgeous, Soph. Look at those eyelashes." "He's going to be loved," Sophia replied with fierce conviction. "So completely loved that he'll never question his worth for even a second." The first weeks were a bewildering symphony of feeding schedules, diaper changes, and the peculiar exhaustion of sleeping in 20-minute intervals. Sophia's apartment became a fortress of love and beautiful chaos, where time was measured in nursing sessions, and victory meant showering before noon. Even exhausted, Sophia found herself compelled to document everything quick watercolor sketches captured during Liam's brief naps. Charcoal drawings of his tiny hands in sleep, the way dawn light caught the silky fuzz of his dark hair. "You're creating a visual diary," Olivia observed during a visit, finding Sophia at her easel while Liam dozed nearby. "I want to remember every moment," Sophia said, adding shadows to a painting of Liam's nursery at sunrise. "Every day he's a little different, a little more himself." Financial pressure was constant but manageable through careful planning. Her Letters to My Unborn Child series had sold well, and freelance graphic design work could be completed during naps and after bedtime. She lived simply but comfortably. Her priorities laser-focused everything for Liam's health, happiness, and security. The most challenging moments came from overwhelming love rather than practical difficulties. When Liam smiled for the first time at 7 weeks, a real, intentional smile, Sophia cried for 30 minutes, celebrating the milestone while mourning that Ethan would never witness that first smile, never hear his son's laughter. "I'm sorry your daddy can't be here," she whispered during midnight feedings. "But I promise you won't feel incomplete. I'll love you enough for both parents." As months passed, Liam developed a distinct personality. He was remarkably easygoing, quick to smile, relatively good at sleeping, fascinated by colors and movement. But he was also intensely observant. Those dark eyes studying everything, with focus that reminded her painfully of Ethan's concentrated attention. "He's exceptionally intelligent, Dr. Carter observed during Liam's 9-month checkup. "His motor skills and cognitive development are well advanced for his age." Sophia felt pride, tinged with bittersweet longing. Ethan would have been so proud of their son's intelligence, but Ethan didn't know Liam existed. By Liam's first birthday, Sophia had established nurturing routines. Mornings began with coffee for her and mashed fruit for him, sitting by the window, watching Seattle wake up. Afternoons meant park visits and art classes where Liam played quietly nearby. Evenings brought bath time, stories, and precious moments rocking him to sleep while humming lullabies. Her artwork evolved dramatically, becoming warmer, more luminous, infused with the unconditional love born from sleepless devotion. Gallery owners who had dismissed her work as overly emotional now praised her for capturing the raw authenticity of motherhood. "There's something alchemical about artists who are mothers," Lucas Bennett told her when Liam was 18 months old, toddling around the studio. "Your work has gained layers of meaning that weren't there before. Motherhood clarifies what's actually important versus what we think should be important," Sophia replied, watching Liam play with colorful blocks, babbling in his own language. As Liam grew into a toddler, his resemblance to Ethan became more pronounced, but his personality remained uniquely his own. He loved music and would dance to classical pieces while she painted. He was gentle with their neighbor's cat, careful with toys, and possessed remarkable empathy. "Mama sad?" he asked one evening when Sophia felt exhausted after a challenging day. At 22 months, his vocabulary was already extensive. "Mama's just tired, baby," she assured him, pulling him onto her lap. "But you make Mama so happy. You're the best thing that ever happened to me." Liam patted her cheek gently. "Mama best too." Moments like these convinced Sophia she'd made the right choice. He knew he was loved unconditionally, never doubted his importance, never had to compete with business deals for attention. He was confident, secure, blossoming into exactly the person she'd hoped, but she noticed his increasing curiosity about fathers. At playgrounds, he watched other children with their dads with obvious interest. During library story time, he asked thoughtful questions about fathers in picture books. And one day, just before his 3rd birthday, came the question she'd been dreading, "Mama, where's my daddy?" Sophia had rehearsed this moment countless times. She knelt to his eye level, choosing words carefully. "Your daddy lives far away, sweetheart," she said gently. "Sometimes grown-ups can't live together. But that doesn't mean they don't love their children. Your daddy loves you very much, even though he can't be here with us right now." "Can I call him?" Liam asked with innocent logic. "Maybe someday," Sophia replied, her heart breaking slightly. "But right now, it's you and me, and we make a pretty amazing team, don't we?" Liam considered this seriously, then nodded decisively. Best team ever. That night, after Liam was safely asleep, Sophia allowed herself to imagine alternatives: Ethan, teaching their son to throw a baseball, reading bedtime stories, being present for milestones. But remembering the man Ethan had become and distracted, absent, choosing everything over family, she knew she'd protected Liam from a different pain. Her son would grow up confident because he'd never had to beg for attention from someone supposed to love him unconditionally. As Liam's 3rd birthday approached, Sophia felt deep satisfaction. She had raised a happy, healthy, loving child who knew his value, who felt secure in her devotion, who was growing into exactly the person she dreamed. She had no way of knowing that in just months a terrifying fever would lead to a desperate phone call, changing everything. She had no way of knowing their carefully constructed life was about to be challenged by the return of the man she'd once loved more than her own existence. All Sophia knew was that she'd given Liam something precious: a childhood, built on presents rather than promises, attention rather than apology, and love that never came with conditions. And watching her son sleep peacefully in his seahorse nightlight's glow, Sophia knew that whatever the future held, she had already succeeded in the most important role of her life. She had loved him enough. Chapter 7. The Call That Changed Two Worlds. Panic, Sophia discovered, has its own language, a high-pitched ringing that starts in your ears and spreads through your entire nervous system until your pulse becomes thunder and your breathing turns into desperate gasps that never bring enough oxygen. At 1:47 a.m. on a bitter March morning, that sound filled her small apartment as she held her 3-year-old son, whose small body burned against her chest like a furnace threatening to consume everything she loved. "Mama, it hurts," Liam whispered, his voice barely audible against her shoulder. His usually bright eyes were glassy and unfocused, his breathing rapid and shallow, his skin radiating heat that seemed to pulse with each heartbeat. Sophia had been monitoring his fever since it started the previous afternoon, a low-grade temperature she'd attributed to the cold he'd been fighting all week. But now the digital thermometer read 104, 7 degrees Fahrenheit, and no amount of children's acetaminophen, cool washcloths, or desperate maternal willpower seemed able to bring it down. "I know, baby," she murmured, her own voice shaking as she carried him to the bathroom and turned on the cool water. "Mama's going to make it better. I promise I'm going to fix this." But as she lowered Liam into the lukewarm bath, his small body limp and unresisting in a way that terrified her beyond reason, Sophia realized this was beyond her ability to heal. This required hospitals and doctors and interventions she couldn't provide at 2 o'clock in the morning. Within minutes, she had Liam wrapped in a towel and secured in his car seat, her hands trembling so violently she could barely fasten the safety buckles. Seattle Children's Hospital was a 20-minute drive through empty streets, and with every red light, every stop sign, Sophia felt precious seconds slipping away like sand through her fingers. "Stay with me, Liam," she pleaded, checking the rearview mirror constantly to ensure he remained conscious. "Stay with Mama, sweetheart. We're almost there. Just hold on." Seattle Children's Hospital at 2:03 a.m. There was a fluorescent-lit purgatory of worried parents and exhausted medical staff, moving with practiced urgency. Sophia carried Liam to the reception desk, where a tired-looking triage nurse took one look at his flushed face and glassy eyes and immediately summoned a medical team. "How long has he had the fever?" asked Dr. Rachel Morgan, the pediatric emergency physician who took charge of Liam's case with the efficient compassion that comes from years of treating frightened children and panicked parents. Since yesterday afternoon, but it spiked dramatically about 2 hours ago, Sophia replied. Following the team as they wheeled Liam into an examination room, I gave him acetaminophen, tried cooling baths, but nothing worked. It just kept climbing. Has he been eating? Drinking fluids? Any vomiting? Very little. He's been lethargic and irritable all day, but I thought it was just the cold he's been fighting. Doctor. Morgan nodded, her hands gentle but thorough, as she examined Liam, who whimpered softly but didn't resist. We're going to start an IV to get fluids and fever reducers into him immediately, run blood tests to determine if this is bacterial or viral, and monitor him closely. Has he had any seizures? No, Sophia said quickly, then paused with growing alarm. At least I don't think so. What do seizures look like in children his age? You'd definitely know if he'd had one, Dr. Morgan assured her. But high fevers can sometimes trigger febrile seizures in toddlers, so getting this temperature down quickly is our primary concern. The next hour blurred together in a medical ballet of IV insertions, blood draws, and monitors that beeped reassuringly as medications began their work. Sophia held Liam's small hand while nurses moved efficiently around his bed, sang soft lullabies while tests were performed, and stroked his hair while fever reducers traveled through the thin tube in his arm. Slowly, mercifully, the medicine began working. Liam's temperature dropped to 102 degrees Fahrenheit, then 101 degrees Fahrenheit, and his breathing became less labored. But he remained worryingly lethargic, and Dr. Morgan wanted him admitted for observation. The positive news is his fever is responding to treatment, Dr. Morgan explained as they prepared to move Liam to a pediatric ward room. We'll have complete blood work results in a few hours. But right now the most important thing is keeping him comfortable and hydrated while his body fights whatever infection this is. By 5 o'clock a.m., Liam was sleeping more peacefully in a hospital bed designed for small patients, his fever stabilized at 99. Sophia sat in the uncomfortable reclining chair beside him, watching the steady rise and fall of his chest. When she realized she should probably call someone, Olivia was in Portland visiting her sister until Thursday. Her parents lived 2 hours away and weren't equipped to handle medical emergencies gracefully. She needed someone who could help if things deteriorated, someone who could. Sophia's phone, which had been reliable all night, suddenly displayed only 1 bar of signal strength. The pediatric ward was located in the hospital's basement level, where cell service had always been notoriously spotty. She tried calling Olivia anyway, but the call dropped immediately after the first ring. Fear crept up her throat again. What if Liam's fever returned? What if she needed to make emergency calls and couldn't get through? She looked around the room desperately, then noticed the landline phone on the bedside table with a small placard. For local calls, dial 9 first. But who could she call? Her emergency contact list was heartbreakingly short. Olivia, her parents, and a few acquaintances who wouldn't appreciate a pre-dawn crisis call. She needed someone who would answer immediately, someone who would come if she asked, someone who, in her exhausted, frightened state, Sophia's fingers began dialing almost automatically. She started with Seattle's 206 area code, then added digits that felt familiar, somehow, numbers that her desperate mind seemed to remember from some distant time when her emergency contact list had been longer, when she hadn't been so completely alone in the world. The first number she tried went directly to voicemail. The second rang busy. The third, Ethan Brooks. The voice hit Sophia like lightning striking water, familiar and foreign simultaneously, deeper than she remembered, roughened by sleep, but unmistakably the voice that had once whispered promises against her skin, that had vowed forever in a flower-filled garden 4 years ago. For a moment, she couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, couldn't process the cosmic cruelty that had connected her to the one person she'd spent 3 years avoiding. Hello? Ethan's voice came again, more alert now. Slightly impatient. Is anyone there? Please, Sophia whispered, the word escaping before rational thought could stop it. I need help. My baby is so sick, and I don't know what to do. The doctors say. Static crackled across the connection, cutting off her words, but she heard Ethan's sharp intake of breath. Sophia. His voice was stunned, uncertain, as if he couldn't trust his own hearing. Sophia, is that you? Ethan, please. I'm at Seattle Children's Hospital. And the line went dead. Sophia stared at the phone in her hand, horror washing over her as she realized what she'd just done. In her panic and exhaustion, she'd called her ex-husband the man who didn't know he had a son, the man she'd deliberately hidden Liam's existence from, the man who was probably already racing to the hospital with questions she wasn't prepared to answer. "Oh God," she whispered, looking at Liam's sleeping face. "What have I done?" 27 minutes later, she had her answer. Ethan appeared in the doorway of Liam's hospital room like a figure from another lifetime, still wearing an expensive suit that suggested he'd been working through the night, his hair disheveled, his face a mask of confusion and dawning comprehension. His eyes swept the room methodically, taking in the medical equipment, the IV pole, the child-sized bed, and finally settling on the small figure under the dinosaur print hospital blanket. Liam was sleeping more peacefully now, his fever broken, his face relaxed but still showing the exhaustion of his ordeal. And in that moment, looking at his son for the first time, Ethan's carefully constructed world imploded. The resemblance was unmistakable and devastating. Liam had Ethan's thick dark hair, his strong jawline, even in miniature, the same impossibly long eyelashes that Ethan's mother had always called wasted on a boy. But more than physical features, there was something in the child's sleeping face that spoke directly to Ethan's Sula recognition that transcended logic or DNA tests. "He's mine," Ethan said quietly, the words more statement than question, his voice filled with wonder and growing anguish. Sophia stood slowly from her chair, her body stiff from hours of hospital vigil, her heart hammering against her ribs like a caged bird. "Ethan, he's my son." Ethan's voice grew stronger, more certain, filled with amazement and building anger, and something that might have been grief for all the time already lost. "How old is he?" "3," Sophia whispered. 3. Ethan performed rapid mental calculations, his business mind computing conception dates, while his heart tried to process the magnitude of what he was seeing. "He was conceived before our divorce was final." "Yes." "And you never told me?" Not a question, an accusation wrapped in hurt, so profound it made his voice rough. "Ethan, please." "Not here. Not now. He's been so sick and I—" "What's his name?" Ethan interrupted, moving closer to the bed, his eyes fixed on Liam's face as if memorizing every detail, every curve, every feature that proved this child was his. "Liam. Liam David." "Liam," Ethan repeated softly, and the name sounded different in his voice, reverent, full of love he didn't know he possessed, for someone he'd just discovered existed. "My God. Sophia. My son. Our son." At the sound of voices, Liam's eyes fluttered open. He looked confused for a moment, taking in the unfamiliar room and intimidating equipment, then focused on his mother, with the relief children show when they find their anchor in chaos. "Mama," he said softly, his voice hoarse from sleep and illness. "I'm right here, baby," Sophia said quickly, moving to sit on the edge of his bed. "How are you feeling?" "Better," Liam said, then noticed the stranger standing at the foot of his bed. With the fearless curiosity of a 3-year-old, he studied Ethan's face with intense concentration. "Who's that man, Mama?" Sophia's throat closed completely. How do you introduce a child to the father who doesn't know he exists? How do you explain 3 years of secrets in words a preschooler can understand? Ethan solved the problem with instinctive gentleness. "Hi, Liam," he said softly, his voice tender in a way Sophia hadn't heard in years. I'm a friend of your mama's. My name is Ethan." Liam considered this information gravely, then pointed to Ethan's face with one small finger. "You look like me." The innocent observation hit Ethan like a physical blow. Out of the mouths of babes came truth that adults complicated with explanations and justifications. He did look like Liam, or rather, Liam looked exactly like Ethan had at that age, like the photographs his mother treasured in old family albums. "Yeah," Ethan managed, his voice thick with emotion. "I guess I do." "Are you my daddy?" Liam asked with the devastating directness that only children possess. The question hung in the air like a bridge waiting to be crossed. Sophia held her breath, waiting for Ethan's response, knowing that whatever he said next would change everything for all three of them. Ethan looked at his Sonies. Sonant felt something fundamental shift in his chest, some complete reordering of priorities that made everything he'd thought was important seem suddenly meaningless. "Would you like me to be?" he asked gently, his heart breaking and healing simultaneously. Liam nodded solemnly, as if he'd been waiting his entire short life for this exact moment. "I've been waiting for my daddy." And in that sterile hospital room at 6 o'clock, surrounded by the beeping of monitors and the antiseptic smell of medical equipment, Ethan Brooks fell completely, irrevocably in love with the child he'd never known existed, and began the long, complicated journey of rebuilding not just his relationship with Sophia, but his understanding of what it truly meant to be a man worth loving. Chapter 8. Rebuilding from Ashes. Trust, Ethan discovered, was not a castle you could rebuild with grand gestures and expensive gifts. It was a delicate bridge, constructed from countless small moments, each plank requiring the careful placement of presence over promises, consistency over convenience, and love measured not in words, but in the willingness to show up, especially when showing up meant sacrificing something else. 4 days after learning he had a son, he sat in his corner office at 5:30 p.m., staring at a contract worth $14 million, while his phone displayed a text from Sophia. "Liam's fever is completely gone. He keeps asking about the man who looks like me." Ethan set down his platinum pen and looked out at the Seattle skyline, remembering the moment in that hospital room when Liam had asked if he could be his daddy. The question had rewritten Ethan's understanding of success, priority, and what it actually meant to be a man worth respecting. "Lucas," he called to his business partner, who was reviewing quarterly projections at the conference table, "cancel the Henderson meeting. Reschedule the Tokyo presentation. I need to leave." Lucas looked up, genuinely surprised. In their 15-year partnership, Ethan had never left the office before 9 o'clock p.m., unless he was traveling for business, and even then, he usually worked from whatever location he'd flown to. "Everything okay?" "The Singapore investors are expecting a response by midnight their time. Delegate it to Sarah," Ethan said, already packing his briefcase. "And Lucas, going forward, nothing gets scheduled after 6 o'clock p.m. or on weekends. We need to hire more senior staff, if that's what it takes." 25 minutes later, Ethan stood outside Sophia's apartment building, clutching a bag of groceries and absolutely no blueprint for what he was doing. How did you become a father to a 3-year-old? How did you rebuild trust with a woman who had every legitimate reason to doubt your capacity for change? How did you prove that this time, you understood what truly mattered? Sophia answered the door wearing paint-stained jeans and a flowing navy top that made her look like an artist goddess. Her expression was carefully guarded, but Ethan caught a flicker of something cautious hope, perhaps, or at least a willingness to try. "Ethan," she said softly, "I wasn't sure you'd actually come. I said I would." Ethan held up the grocery bag, feeling awkward and determined simultaneously. "I brought ingredients for dinner." He produced a small wrapped package from his jacket pocket. "And something for Liam, if that's okay with you." Sophia stepped aside to let him enter, and Ethan was struck by how different her apartment felt from the penthouse they'd shared. This space was smaller but infinitely warmer, filled with Liam's artwork taped to the refrigerator, toys scattered across the living room floor, the comfortable chaos of actual living, and Sophia's paintings covering every available wall. It felt like a home, in a way their expensive showcase had never managed. "Liam's in his room," Sophia said, leading him toward the kitchen. "He's been talking about you constantly since we got home from the hospital. Apparently, having a daddy is the most exciting thing that's ever happened to him. And having a son is—" Ethan paused, searching for words that could contain the enormity of what he was feeling. "Terrifying, overwhelming, the most incredible thing that's ever happened to me." Sophia turned to face him fully, and Ethan saw the pain she'd been carrying like armor. "Ethan, we need to establish some boundaries about why I never told you, about what this means going forward." "About Daddy," Liam's voice interrupted from the hallway, followed by the thunder of small feet racing toward them. "Daddy, You came back." Before Ethan could respond, 3 feet of pure joy launched itself at his legs, small arms wrapping around his knees with the absolute trust that only children possess. Ethan froze for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of that word, Daddy, and everything it meant he now had to become. "Hey, buddy," he said softly, kneeling to Liam's eye level. "How are you feeling today?" "All better," Liam announced proudly, then leaned closer to whisper conspiratorially. "Mama made soup for lunch, but it was yucky. Did you bring better food?" Ethan glanced at Sophia, who was obviously trying not to smile. "I brought ingredients for spaghetti and meatballs. Think you could help me cook?" "I'm the best helper," Liam declared with the confidence of someone who'd never been told otherwise, grabbing Ethan's hand and pulling him toward the kitchen. "I can stir and measure and everything." And just like that, Ethan found himself in Sophia's compact kitchen, teaching a 3-year-old how to roll meatballs while marinara sauce simmered on the stove. Liam stood on a wooden step stool beside him, his small hands covered in meat mixture, chattering constantly about his toys, his friends at daycare, and the elaborate picture he'd drawn of his family that now included my daddy, who looks exactly like me. "The meatballs should be round like balls," Liam said seriously, examining Ethan's attempt with the critical eye of a perfectionist. "Like this. See?" He held up a perfectly spherical meatball. "Mama taught me the right way." "You're absolutely right," Ethan said, marveling at his son's concentration and natural teaching ability. "You're a much better cook than I am." "Mama's the best cook in the whole world," Liam said loyally. "But you can learn if you practice. Mama says practice makes progress, not perfect." From across the kitchen, Sophia watched them together, her heart performing complicated gymnastics in her chest. Ethan was patient with Liam in a way that genuinely surprised her, allowing him to help with real tasks instead of giving him meaningless busy work, listening to his constant chatter with apparent fascination, treating him like a capable small person rather than an inconvenience to be managed. This was the Ethan she'd fallen in love with, present, engaged, making whoever had his attention feel like the most important person in the universe. She'd forgotten this version of him existed. During dinner, Ethan asked Liam about his favorite books, anything about Dinosaur's favorite colors, blue like the ocean and yellow like the Sunand, whether he preferred building blocks or puzzles blocks, because you can make anything you imagine. Liam answered every question with the enthusiasm of a child who finally had someone new to share his thoughts with. And Ethan listened with the same intensity he'd once reserved for board presentations. "Do you live far away?" Liam asked around a mouthful of spaghetti, marinara sauce decorating his chin. "Not too far," Ethan replied carefully. "But I used to travel a lot for work, like on airplanes." "Sometimes?" "Yes." Liam considered this information seriously. "Can I come with you sometime? On an airplane? I've never been on one." Ethan's throat tightened with the weight of possibilities and responsibilities he'd never considered. "Maybe someday, buddy. Would you like that?" "Yeah. I could help with your work stuff. I'm really good at helping people." After dinner, while Liam built an elaborate city with wooden blocks in the living room, Ethan and Sophia finally had the conversation they'd been avoiding. "Why didn't you tell me?" Ethan asked quietly, his voice free of accusation but heavy with hurt. 3 years, Sophia. 3 years of his life that I can never get back. Sophia sat beside him on the couch, close enough to see the genuine pain in his eyes, but careful not to touch. "Because I was terrified," she said with stark honesty. "Terrified. You'd see him as another obligation competing for your time. Terrified. He'd grow up feeling like he was less important than your business deals and conference calls. I would never treat my own son like—" "Wouldn't you?" Sophia's voice was gentle but unwavering. "Ethan, in the last year of our marriage, you missed anniversary dinners for investor calls. You worked through my most important exhibition opening. You chose business over us every single time without exception." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, watching Liam carefully stack blocks into what appeared to be a castle, complete with towers and bridges. "I thought I was building our future," he said finally. "I thought if I worked hard enough, made enough money, achieved enough success, I could give you everything you deserved. All I ever wanted was you," Sophia replied simply. "Present, engaged, choosing us instead of always choosing work first. I was an idiot," Ethan said without defensiveness. I was so focused on providing financially that I forgot about providing emotionally. I lost sight of what actually mattered most. And I was afraid Liam would disappear the same way I did. Ethan turned to face her completely. I want to be his father, Sophia, not just financially responsible, but actually be his father. I want to know his favorite bedtime story, what makes him laugh until he gets hiccups, how he likes his sandwiches cut. I want to be there for skin knees and school plays and every single moment I've already missed. That's what I want too, Sophia said softly. But it has to be reliable, Ethan. Liam can't have a part-time father who shows up when it's convenient. Children need consistency above everything else. I understand. Ethan ran his hands through his hair. I've already started restructuring everything at work, delegating major responsibilities, setting firm boundaries about hours and travel, rebuilding the entire company culture, but I know that's not enough. I need to prove it through actions, not just words. Daddy, Liam called from across the room. My castle fell down. Let's rebuild it, Ethan said immediately, moving to sit beside his son on the floor. Sometimes things fall down, but that just means we get to build them even stronger than before. As Ethan helped Liam reconstruct his block castle, asking questions about the design and praising his engineering skills, Sophia watched them together and felt something she hadn't experienced in years. Genuine hope, real hope, that maybe, just maybe, they could build something beautiful from the ashes of what they'd lost. Over the following weeks, Ethan established a careful but consistent routine. He visited every Tuesday and Thursday evening, bringing dinner and staying for bath time and elaborate bedtime stories. He took Liam to Discovery Park on Saturday mornings, teaching him to identify different types of trees and pushing him on the swings until his arms ached. He was patient when Liam had meltdowns, consistent about keeping promises, and completely devoted during every minute he spent with his son. You're getting good at this, Sophia observed one evening, watching Ethan help Liam with a complicated puzzle featuring the solar system. I'm learning, Ethan replied, carefully fitting a piece shaped like Saturn into its designated spot. He's an excellent teacher, very patient with his old man when I mess up. I'm not old, Liam protested, looking up from the puzzle with indignation. I'm 3 3/4. You're absolutely right, Ethan said seriously. You're the perfect age. I'm the ancient one in this family. Liam giggled and returned to his puzzle, and Ethan felt something settle permanently in his chest, a sense of rightness, of being exactly where he belonged. This was what mattered. This was what success actually looked like. Slowly, carefully, with the patience of someone who understood he was rebuilding more than just a relationship, Ethan was learning to be the father Liam deserved and the man Sophia had once believed he could become. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't quick. But Ethan was discovering that the most worthwhile things in life, love, trust, family, were worth every effort required to build them properly. And in her heart, Sophia began to believe that maybe, just maybe, some love stories were strong enough to survive even their own endings. Chapter 9. Hearts Remembering How to Trust. Love, Sophia realized, was not a light switch that could be flipped on and off at will, but more like the careful tending of embers. With enough patience, gentle breathing, and the right conditions, even the smallest spark could be coaxed back into a flame that burned brighter and warmer than before. 8 weeks after Ethan had walked back into their lives, she stood in her kitchen, watching him teach Liam how to crack eggs for Saturday morning pancakes, and felt something she thought was permanently extinguished beginning to glow again in her chest. Remember, buddy, you want to tap it gently on the bowl's edge, Ethan was saying, his large hands guiding Liam's tiny ones with infinite patience. Like you're knocking on a friend's door, not trying to break it down. Like this? Liam asked, his face scrunched in concentration as he carefully tapped the egg against the ceramic rim. Perfect. Now pull it apart slowly. There you go. You're a natural chef. Liam beamed with pride as the egg dropped cleanly into the bowl, only a few small shell pieces making it past his careful technique. I did it. Mama, look. I cracked a whole egg, and it didn't break into a million pieces. I saw, sweetheart, Sophia said, her voice warm with maternal pride and something more complicated, more dangerous. You're becoming quite the breakfast expert. She'd been observing these Saturday morning cooking lessons for 4 weeks now, ever since Ethan had tentatively asked if he could extend their Tuesday and Thursday visits to include weekend breakfasts. What had started as formal visitation requests had evolved into something that looked suspiciously like family routines, weekend traditions, and the kind of domestic harmony she'd once dreamed of but never quite achieved. The changes in Ethan weren't limited to his interactions with Liam, though those transformations were remarkable enough. He'd memorized their son's favorite songs, mastered the intricate bedtime routine, and could now navigate playground politics with the expertise of a seasoned parent. But Sophia had also noticed subtler shifts, the way Ethan's phone remained completely silent during their time together, how he spoke about work with less obsession and more balance, the way he looked at her when he thought she wasn't watching. "Pancakes are ready for flipping," Liam announced, bouncing on his step stool with excitement. "Almost ready," Ethan corrected gently, sliding the spatula under the golden pancake with a flourish that made Liam giggle. "What do you think? Should we make one shaped like a dinosaur for Mama?" "Yes, Mama loves dinosaurs almost as much as she loves us," Liam declared with the confident authority of a 3-year-old who knew his mother's preferences intimately. "Actually," Sophia said, moving closer to the stove before she could stop herself, "Mama loves watching her 2 favorite people cook together more than anything else." The words escaped before her internal editor could catch them, more honest than she'd intended to be. Ethan looked up from the griddle, and their eyes met across the small kitchen, the same kitchen where she'd eaten countless solitary meals, where she'd fed Liam through sleepless nights, where she'd learned to be enough for both of them. Now it felt different, complete, like the home she'd always imagined but never quite managed to create. "Your 2 favorite people?" Ethan asked softly, something hopeful and vulnerable flickering in his dark eyes. "Don't let it go to your head, Brooks," Sophia replied. But she was smiling as she said it, and Ethan's answering grin was like sunrise after the longest winter night. After breakfast, they took Liam to the Seattle Center, where Ethan pushed him on the swings, while Sophia sketched them both, her son's joy-bright face, Ethan's intense concentration as he adjusted each push to Liam's shouted requests for higher or not so high. She'd been painting them together lately, capturing moments that felt too precious to trust to memory alone. "Daddy, come see," Liam called from the top of the elaborate climbing structure. "I'm really, really high up." Ethan immediately abandoned his conversation with another parent about preschool recommendations and jogged over to admire Liam's climbing achievement with appropriate awe. Sophia watched him respond without hesitation to their son's call for attention and felt another small ember of hope flicker to life. This was what she'd needed, 4 years ago, a partner who understood that children's moments couldn't be rescheduled, that Daddy, come see, was infinitely more important than any business call or networking opportunity. "You're thinking very intensely about something," Olivia observed, settling beside Sophia on the park bench. She joined them for the afternoon, claiming curiosity about meeting the man who had supposedly transformed himself from workaholic to devoted father. "I'm thinking I might be in serious trouble," Sophia admitted quietly, watching Ethan help Liam navigate the monkey bars with endless patience and encouragement. Good trouble or terrifying trouble? The kind where you start believing in second chances even though your brain knows better. Olivia followed her gaze to where Ethan was now hanging upside down from the monkey bars, making Liam shriek with delighted laughter. "He's different than I expected," she said thoughtfully. "When you described your ex-husband, I pictured someone cold, calculating. But this guy, he's completely present with Liam, like genuinely present. That's exactly what scares me," Sophia confessed. "It's easy to be present for a few hours twice a week. Marriage is about being present for the boring moments, the difficult conversations, the 3 a.m. fever scares, and grocery store tantrums. Has he experienced any of those yet?" As if summoned by their conversation, Liam chose that moment to have a spectacular meltdown because another child was using his favorite swing. Sophia started to intervene, but Ethan was already there, kneeling at eye level with their distraught son. Sophia and Olivia watched as Ethan spoke quietly to Liam, acknowledging his disappointment while gently redirecting his attention to other playground options. No bribes, no threats, no embarrassed apologies to other parents. Just patient understanding until Liam's tears stopped and he agreed to try the twisty slide instead. "Okay, "That's genuinely impressive," Olivia murmured. Most men would have either given in immediately or gotten frustrated and demanded he stop crying. "He's learning fast," Sophia said, pride and caution warring in her voice. "The question is whether he can sustain this when the novelty wears off." That evening, after Olivia had gone home and Liam was bathed and tucked into bed with his favorite dinosaur, Ethan lingered in the living room instead of leaving immediately as he usually did. "Stay for coffee," Sophia offered, then felt her cheeks warm at how that sounded like a date, like an invitation to something more complicated than co-parenting. "I'd like that very much," Ethan said simply. They sat on opposite ends of her couch, coffee cups warming their hands, the silence comfortable in a way that surprised them both. Outside, spring rain tapped against the windows in the rhythm that had provided the soundtrack to their original love story 4 years earlier. "Can I ask you something?" Ethan said finally. "Of course. When you found out you were pregnant, was there ever a moment when you considered telling me?" Sophia was quiet for so long that Ethan wondered if he'd overstepped some invisible boundary. Then she set down her coffee cup and looked at him directly. "Every single day," she said simply. "Every day for 9 months, I thought about calling you. I even dialed your number several times, but I could never make myself complete the call." "Why not?" "Because I was terrified you'd see the baby as a trap designed to force you back into a relationship you'd clearly outgrown. Or worse, that you'd want to be involved, but only on your terms, weekend visits, holiday custody, being a father when it was convenient for your schedule." Sophia's voice remained steady, but Ethan could hear old hurt underneath. "I couldn't bear the thought of our child feeling the way I felt in our last year of marriage, like an obligation instead of a choice." Ethan set down his own cup and moved closer to her on the couch, close enough to see the flecks of gold in her brown eyes, close enough to breathe the jasmine scent that still made his heart race. "I was a complete fool," he said simply. "I was so focused on building what I thought was our future that I completely lost sight of our present. I lost you, and I missed 3 years of Liam's life because I was too proud and too stupid to understand what actually mattered." "Ethan, no. Let me finish," he said gently. "I don't blame you for not telling me. Given who I was then, you made the only responsible choice, but I want you to know that I'm not that man anymore. Being with Liam, seeing how incredible he is, understanding what I missed, it's fundamentally changed everything about how I see success, priority, meaning." Sophia studied his face, searching for truth behind his words. "What's different specifically?" "Everything," Ethan said earnestly. "I restructured my entire company so I could delegate operational responsibilities. I turned down the Singapore expansion because it would require constant international travel. I hired a CFO and promoted 3 VPs so I can focus on being present for the people who matter most. And those people are you and Liam," Ethan said without hesitation. "You're my family. You're what I should have been protecting and prioritizing all along." The words hung between them, loaded with possibility and the weight of shared history. Sophia felt her heart speed up, remembering the man who had once loved her with this kind of focused intensity, this kind of unwavering certainty. "Ethan," she said carefully, "I need you to understand something important. I'm not the same woman I was 4 years ago. I've learned to be completely independent, to rely on myself, to make decisions without consulting anyone else. I won't go back to being the wife who waits quietly while her husband pursues other priorities." "I wouldn't want you to," Ethan said fervently. "Sophia, watching you raise Liam, seeing how strong you've become, how you've built this beautiful life for our son, I'm in awe of who you are now. I don't want to change you. I want to be worthy of you." Something shifted in Sophia's chest, like a door that had been locked for years, finally beginning to creak open. "It's not that simple, Ethan. Trust doesn't just return because you say the right words." "I know," Ethan said softly. "I'm willing to earn it back day by day, choice by choice, for as long as it takes." Before Sophia could respond, Liam's voice called from his bedroom. "Mama, I had a bad dream about monsters." "I'll go," Ethan said automatically, standing up. "May I?" Sophia nodded, watching as Ethan disappeared down the hallway toward their son's room. She heard the soft murmur of voices, Ethan's deeper tone mixing with Liam's sleepy chatter, and felt something dangerous blooming in her chest hope. terrifying, wonderful hope that maybe they could be a family again, that maybe love was strong enough to survive mistakes and time, and all the ways two people could hurt each other before learning how to love better. When Ethan returned 15 minutes later, he found Sophia exactly where he'd left her, looking thoughtful and slightly stunned. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Bad dream about dinosaurs that were too big and scary. But we talked about how daddies and mamas have special powers that are stronger than any monster, and how love is the best protection of all." Ethan paused, then added quietly, "He asked if I could read him stories every night instead of just sometimes." "What did you tell him?" "That I'd love that more than anything, if it was okay with Mama." Sophia looked at this man, her ex-husband, her son's father, the person who had broken her heart and was now carefully offering to help piece it back together, and made a choice that felt like jumping off a cliff while simultaneously growing wings. "I think," she said slowly, "that would be very okay with Mama." Ethan's smile was like dawn breaking over calm water, bright and warm and full of infinite promise. And for the first time in 4 years, Sophia allowed herself to believe that some love stories were strong enough to survive anything, even their own endings. Chapter 10. Forever Begins Again. Love, Ethan had discovered through 4 years of devastating loss and 6 months of painstaking rebuilding, was not a destination you reached once and claimed forever. It was a daily choice, a commitment renewed with every sunrise, every shared laugh, every moment when you chose presence over absence, us over me. Standing in the Horizon Art Gallery on a crisp October evening, watching Sophia guide Liam through the same exhibition space where their love story had begun, Ethan felt the weight and wonder of that choice settling into his soul like a long-awaited homecoming. "Mama, this one looks exactly like our park," Liam exclaimed, pointing at one of Sophia's newest paintings, a luminous watercolor of their Saturday morning playground adventures, all golden light and captured joy. "That's because it is our park, sweetheart," Sophia replied, lifting him up to examine the painting more closely. "I painted it last weekend while you and Daddy were practicing soccer." "It's extraordinary," Ethan said softly, studying the way gallery lights caught the copper highlights in Sophia's hair, the way Liam's face glowed with pride. "All of your recent work is... there's something completely different about it." "I'm painting happiness now," Sophia said simply, her eyes meeting his. "For the longest time, I painted heartbreak and loneliness. But lately, I've been painting hope." The gallery opening celebrated Sophia's latest collection, Rebuilding, a study in second chances, 45 paintings chronicling the past 6 months of their careful dance back toward each other. Tender father-son moments, quiet family dinners, Liam's laughter filling spaces that had been silent too long. Ethan had commissioned the entire evening as a surprise, working secretly with the gallery director to create an event that honored Sophia's artistic evolution while celebrating the family they'd somehow reconstructed from ashes. "There are so many people here," Liam observed, suddenly shy as he noticed the crowd of art patrons and critics moving through the space. "They're here to see Mama's beautiful paintings," Ethan explained, kneeling to Liam's level, "and to meet the inspiration behind some of her most powerful pieces." "I'm the inspiration?" Liam asked, eyes wide with wonder. "You absolutely are," Sophia confirmed, kissing his head. "You're my greatest masterpiece." As the evening progressed, Ethan watched Sophia in her element, gracious with collectors, thoughtful with critics, patient with admirers. She wore a flowing dress, the color of deep ocean water, moving through the gallery like poetry in motion, completely at home in her success. This was the woman he'd fallen in love with, but she was also someone new, stronger, more independent, grounded in her own worth in ways that made her even more beautiful. "She's remarkable," said Dr. Margaret Ellis, a collector who had purchased 3 pieces. "There's an emotional authenticity in her work that's quite rare. You must be incredibly proud." "I am," Ethan replied, meaning it completely. "She's the strongest, most talented person I know." At 8:30, Ethan caught the gallery director's attention with a subtle nod. The crowd was gently guided toward the main exhibition space, leaving Ethan, Sophia, and Liam alone in the smaller back room that housed one final covered piece. "Why is everyone leaving?" Sophia asked, confusion clear in her voice. "Because this last painting is meant to be seen privately first," Ethan said, his heart hammering as he led her toward the covered easel. I commissioned it specifically for tonight, for this moment. Ethan, what are you? Let me show you our future, he said softly, pulling away the silk cloth to reveal the painting underneath. Sophia gasped. It was them, all three of them, painted by Lucas Bennett in his distinctive style, but it wasn't a recreation of any actual moment. Instead, it showed their tomorrow, Ethan and Sophia dancing at what was clearly a wedding ceremony. While Liam stood between them, all three hands joined together, happiness radiating from every brushstroke. It's called Forever Begins Today, Ethan said, his voice thick with emotion, because that's what I'm hoping this moment represents, the real beginning of our actual forever. Before Sophia could respond, Ethan dropped to one knee, producing a ring box that held not his grandmother's vintage ring that belonged to their first attempt, but something entirely new, a stunning sapphire. The color of twilight surrounded by diamonds that caught the lights like captured stars. Mama, Liam whispered excitedly, clearly prepared for this moment. Daddy's doing the thing from the movies. Sophia, Ethan began, his voice steady despite the magnitude of what he was asking. 4 years ago, I asked you to marry me because I thought I understood what love was. I thought it was passion and promises and finding your missing piece. I wasn't wrong about those things, but I didn't understand that real love, lasting love, is also choice and commitment and showing up consistently, especially when it's difficult. Tears streamed down Sophia's face, but she was smiling, and Ethan took courage from that radiant smile. I lost you once because I chose everything else over you, he continued. I let ambition convince me that providing financially was the same as loving completely. I was wrong, and I'm sorry. And I promise you, that will never happen again. I love who you've become, he said with fierce tenderness. I love your strength, your independence, the incredible mother you are. I love that you don't need me to complete you, which makes me want to spend every day proving I deserve to compliment you instead. Liam stepped forward and placed his small hand on Ethan's. We want to ask you something, Mama, he said solemnly. What do you want to ask me, baby? Sophia managed through her tears. Will you marry Daddy again so we can be a real family forever? Liam asked with innocent directness. He promised to read me stories every night and help you paint and never ever miss my birthday or any important things. Ethan opened the ring box, the sapphire throwing rainbow patterns across the walls. Sophia Harper, will you marry me? Not because I think you need me, but because I know I need you. Will you let me spend the rest of my life proving that some people really can change, that some love really is strong enough to survive anything? Sophia looked at the man kneeling before her, the father of her child, the love of her life, the person who had broken her heart and spent months carefully putting it back together with actions instead of words. She thought of all the reasons to say no, all the ways this could go wrong, all the safety in keeping her walls intact. Then she looked at Liam, bouncing with excitement, and saw the family they could be no perfect, but real and tested and strong enough to weather any storm. Yes, she said, her voice clear and certain. Yes, I'll marry you. I'll marry both of you. Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, then stood, gathering both her and Liam into his arms as applause erupted from the main gallery. Their private moment hadn't been quite as private as they'd thought, but neither cared. The wedding took place 5 months later, in the same botanical garden where they'd been married the first time. But everything was different. This time, Liam walked Sophia down the aisle, stopping to wave at guests and announce proudly, "That's my mama. She's getting married to my daddy." This time, their vows were written from experience rather than hope, grounded in hard-earned knowledge of what it meant to love through difficulty and change. "Ethan," Sophia said, her voice carrying clearly through the garden, "I promise to choose us every day, even when it requires sacrifice. I promise to believe in your growth while maintaining my independence. I promise to build a family based on presence, not perfection." "Sophia," Ethan replied, "I promise to show up not just physically, but emotionally, completely, every single day. I promise to choose family over everything else. Always. I promise to love you and Liam not just with words but with my time, attention, and unwavering commitment to being the husband and father you both deserve." When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Liam cheered so loudly that the entire wedding party dissolved into laughter, and when Ethan kissed his bride, sealing their second chance at forever, it tasted like hope fulfilled and promises that would actually be kept. 2 years later, on a Sunday morning in their new house, complete with Sophia's dream studio and a backyard perfect for a growing family, Ethan woke to his wife humming in the kitchen and his son's laughter echoing down the hallway. He found them making pancakes together, Liam explaining proper egg-cracking technique to his baby sister, Ava Clara, who gurgled happily in her high chair. "Good morning, my beautiful family," Ethan said, wrapping his arms around Sophia and pressing a kiss to her neck. "Daddy," Liam called without turning around. "Ava likes it when I make funny faces while I cook. Watch this." Ethan watched his son perform an elaborate dance for his 6-month-old sister, listened to Sophia's musical laughter, and felt gratitude so complete it took his breath away. This was what he'd been searching for, not just love, but love lived daily, not just family, but the choice to prioritize family every single day, not just success, but success measured in bedtime stories read, and never missing the moments that mattered most. Outside their window, Seattle was waking up to another ordinary Sunday. But inside their home, Ethan Brooks was living the extraordinary life he'd almost lost, surrounded by the woman who taught him how to love properly, and the children who'd shown him what it really meant to be a man worth choosing. Love, he'd finally learned, wasn't about finding your missing piece. It was about choosing to build something beautiful with someone who chose to build it back day after day, choice after choice, forever and always.